So they got the sow back, and that's good. And they at first thought they were chasing a wild boar. Now, when Europeans wandered the oceans, they quite often brought pigs with them, and then set the pigs free on the islands and let the pigs fend for themselves. And this was done in order so that they would be able to like come back and have a supply of fresh meat, because pigs are omnivorous. They eat anything. I mean, pigs are infamous for eating anything, and quite often a lot of the food that we don't eat that would go to waste actually ends up going as pig feed. So, for instance, if there is vegetables which are harvested which start to go rotten that you can't even chop up and freeze or make into veggie burgers or make into whatever, it's fed to the pigs because the pigs will happily eat it. Um, Chickens are much the same way. So a lot of the food that would otherwise go to waste ends up being recycled and going into animal feed. Now, so the Europeans would take these pigs and set them free on the island, and the pigs would reproduce and overrun the island and kill all the native plants and animals. But that's the way they were back then. And they didn't know any better, and they didn't have conservation and ecology, and they, it's like, okay, we're supposed to garden the world and make it over so it's all wonderful for us, and well, oh well, if there's no more red birds in Hawaii anyway. But that's a different story. Anyway, um, so the animals, they set the pigs free, and the pigs would go and whatever. And pigs got set free in North America like that. And they went feral. And they became feral, which means they're animals that were formerly domesticated but now are wildish. So they still retain some traits that they had as being domesticated, but they behave and act like wild animals. So you have these feral pigs, which are just like all over the planet, and they can get really big, like 12 feet long. Well, not quite 12 feet long, 9 feet long, and thousands of pounds. And they, as I said, they'll eat anything. So the pig will eat you. This is one of those things that a pig will eat you if it can. And there are stories of people falling into pig pens and being eaten. There are stories of murderers hiding bodies, and they toss the body in the pig pen, and the pigs eat everything, and nothing's found. So a wild boar is not something to be trifled with. There's 4 of them with guns, so they're probably okay. 2 of them with guns are probably okay. Maybe. 2 of them with guns are maybe okay. Because these are flintlocks, and because they're flintlocks, you get 1 shot. So if you miss, or if the pig is just wounded, because, this is a couple 1,000-pound animal, if it is large and angry and you hit it with the pig may just continue on. And so this is a thing where people get killed by hunting wild pigs. So anyway, so they go after the pig and they find out it's their sow. It's like, hooray, it's our sow back. No idea what they're planning to do with the sow. I mean, they're probably going to be feeding it kitchen scraps and, rotting vegetables and such. But maybe they're keeping it around to make meat eventually. But since they only have a female pig, they can't get more little pigs. So we'll see how that goes. And I've not heard of ever taking milk from pigs. Probably wouldn't want to. Pigs tend to be dirty. But so they also practice with what they called a lasso. Now, this is not what most people think of as a lasso. Most people think of a lasso as a loop of rope attached to another end of rope, and you twirl the rope around and you throw the loop and you catch around the neck of an animal, and then it's used in rodeos. So rodeos are a amusement in the South, mostly, Texas, Oklahoma. So it's this sort of South Central, Southwest that evolved as sort of cowboy games where people demonstrated their skills that are, the skills that make a cowboy, sort of like an Olympic event, except, the Olympics started out as military events. You throw the javelin, which was a weapon. You threw the shot put, which was a weapon. You threw the hammer, which was a weapon. You run a long distance, which is used to, tell people, hey, the Persians are coming. We need to fight them. Okay, run back and fight them. That's the Battle of Marathon. Or, a short sprint. So it's like running away from somebody. Or archery or guns. And all of these things are the Olympic Games. Well, rodeos are cowboy sports. So you have riding a bull. Now, you wouldn't normally ride a bull because there's not much purpose in riding a bull. But that shows your riding competency for riding a horse. So one of the things that they do is bull riding. So you get on the bull, you tie a rope around the bull's chest. You held onto it with one hand, and that's all that you're allowed. And they let the bull loose, and you have to hold on as long as you can. You keep the other hand up in the air like this to prove that you're only holding on with one hand. And the bull is angry, and the bull is going to try and toss you off because, the bull's angry because it's pinned up, and, you have somebody on its back, and bulls are not used to being ridden, so they're like, get this off, get this off, get this off. You also have bronco busting, which is they take a horse, and horses, even the feral ones, are somewhat okay-ish. Well, eventually become okay-ish with being ridden, but you take a horse that's never been ridden and you put a guy on it, and the horse, just like the bull, is not going to be happy about this and is going to try to toss the guy off. And that was one of the ways that they would tame horses back in the day and make them rideable, is you take the horse and you ride it, and eventually the horse goes, okay, there's no way I'm going to get out of this. I'm just going to lay down and just carry the guy. Or another thing was calf roping. So you have a young calf, and it runs out because it's kind of scared. It's little, it's skittish. And then you have cowboy on a horse chasing it with the lariat, tosses the lasso, gets the rope around the calf's neck, pulls, calf stumbles, falls, cowboy runs up, and quick ties up all the legs together. So here you have this little cow, and it's all frightened, and it gets tied up. And you do this for time. So they run and they see who can tie up the calf the fastest. And these are games that are played at a rodeo. And so a lasso is what most people think of, the loop of rope that tightens up. It's connected to a long piece of rope. So essentially you'd have like a slip knot that goes around the rope and makes a loop. And when it pulls the rope tight and tightens up. So it's a slip knot. Anyway, so ties up, and that's what most people think of as a lasso. Now, the weapon that they're describing here is a long piece of rope with two weights at the end. He said bullets, so he probably took bullets from the gun, nice lead weight. And what that does is that gives some extra weight at the end, which allows it to have more momentum. So you have the lead weight at the end, and you just spin it like this, and you let it go, and it goes off, and because there's the angular momentum, the whole contraption starts spinning. And so it's spinning as it goes out around the animal, and one part hits, and then it wraps around like that, and the animal trips up. Most people think of that, and they call it a bolo. That, I believe, is the Philippine word for it. But it's a classic primitive weapon that, they found these Stone Age. So this is one of humanity's first weapons of, hey, let's throw something and tie it up and capture it. They go looking for water. Don't find water here. They have water, obviously, at Falconhurst and at Tentholm. they have the water at the Ten Home for the creek, and Falconhurst, I think the creek runs up there as well. So they have water there, and that means that, they need to know which part of the island is, they'll have to keep track of where on the island they have water. And just be prepared for that, because water is something you can't live without. Now, they haven't gone completely into this, and I don't know if they will, because, as I've said in previous chapters, it gets the geography weird and wrong. But tropical islands tend to have two sides. You have the windward side and the leeward side. And because of the trade winds, where there's latitudes where the winds almost always go east to west. And there's other latitudes where they almost go west to east, almost always go west to east. I mean, this is like every day, it's this constant wind. And this constant wind means that there's different weather patterns. Because what happens is you have the wind coming in off of the water. And the wind coming in off of the water has a lot of moisture and a lot of humidity, because the ocean just sits there and boils, slowly boils. So the ocean sits there and gives up moisture as the wind blows across it. And it comes onto the island and goes up. As it goes up the side of the mountain on top of the island, because, these islands aren't atolls. They have hill, mountain in the middle. As the warm, wet air goes up the mountain, it cools. And as it cools, the dew point drops and the water starts falling out as rain. And then it hits the top of the mountain, it comes back down. And as it comes back down, it expands and it warms up. And as it warms up, it starts picking up more moisture. So on these tropical islands, you have the windward side, which is wet. And I mean, it's like jungle, and that's what you think about when you think about the tropical islands. You think about Hawaii, you think about this lush, green, verdant, jungle, plants growing, rain every day. But on the other side of the island, it's this dry, grassy scrub, almost desert. And that's the difference between the two sides of the island. So they started out with Tentholm, with a nice creek, Falconhurst, nice and green. And here they are over on the Calabash side, where you have a desert almost. And I mean, they said iguana, and iguanas live in dry climates, live in fairly dry climates. And the Calabash is also kind of a dry plant. So you have the dry side and the wet side of the island. So we'll see how that goes. Hopefully they'll remember more water next time. Oh yes, coconut crabs, totally weird thing. I've seen pictures of them. I read this book as a child, and I must have totally forgotten about the coconut crab. But I mean, these things are huge. Literally, the size of a trash can lid. And I mean, I saw pictures of them, and it's like, no, that can't be real. It's like, wait a minute, I totally forgot that I read about them being in this book, because I know they're real, but, well, I didn't know they were real. I'd forgotten that they were real. But coconut crabs, real thing. They are born in the water, and they're born in the water. When they get little size, they come up on land, and then they spend the rest of their lives on land, because their gills kind of atrophy and they can no longer breathe water. And so if you put a large full-grown coconut crab into the water, it drowns. So here you have something that's nominally a sea creature that drowns. Other animals, other fish can drown, but that's usually when there's low oxygen in the water. But these are things that just drown normally, because they can't live on water anymore. It's like they start out their life cycle in the water, and then they move on to land and they stay there. Like tadpoles. Well, frogs live in the water, but they have lungs. But they start out swimming with gills, and the gills disappear, and the frogs, once again, the frog will drown if you hold it underwater, because, at the point where it's become a frog, it's lost its gills and it only has lungs. So it's one of those things that change over time.